Welcome to the Authority File, the podcast where you'll hear conversations with academic librarians, technologists, researchers, and authors whose work is laying the foundation for higher education's future. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. If you're new to the Authority File, you can listen to and find previous episodes on all of the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and on our website, choice360.org. My guests for this series are Tamsin O'Riordan, Editorial Director, Social Science, and Felicity Plester, Editorial Director, Humanities, both from Palgrave Macmillan. In this 4-episode series, which is provided with support from Palgrave Macmillan, Tamsin and Felicity provide a fascinating look behind the scenes at how humanities and social sciences publishing supports social justice. We'll look at the roles HSS plays in the way we solve and confront some of the most pressing issues of the day, from the perspectives of research, acquisition, community engagement, and the publisher's own internal operations. In this final episode of our series, we talk about the importance, from an editor's perspective, of focusing on interdisciplinary titles and subjects, and what that says about the research, readership, and evolution of our societies. We'll also get a peek at emerging topics that Tamsin and Felicity are keeping a special eye on. So let's get into some sort of looking ahead kinds of questions. And how have you been expanding your collections into new formats? How do your social justice efforts factor into those format decisions? For example, new readers, access, sustainability, like we've just been discussing, affordability, and so on.
So obviously ebooks really are now the most powerful way of disseminating research that we publish worldwide, and all our titles are available on Springerlink via online retailers and via third-party aggregators as well. Until very recently, our main way of selling content to institutions has typically been through these big subject collections, which contain all the books that have been published in a certain area within a certain copyright year. So we have 10 humanities and social sciences subject collections in total, and they are every year filled up each time. But these can be quite expensive and a little bit out of reach for smaller institutions. So we have now begun to offer 3 additional new flexible ebook products, which are designed to make our content a lot more accessible. These are called Access and Select, reference modules, and single titles. So Access and Select is an evidence-based selection model that combines ebook access with additional services. So it offers things like sort of further discounts on print, or availability of my copy, or vouchers for individual ebooks, amongst kind of lots of other whizzy stuff as well. There's 4 different plans to choose from, and they offer access to a large selection of content and the ability to license titles which have proved popular, basically. So they look at denials, that kind of thing. And each year the subscription is renewed, access grows, and gives users a really great volume of ebooks to kind of work with. Reference modules are now where our major reference works are found, and there are 5 of these. So there's one specifically for humanities and social sciences. So the major reference works were originally sold as part of the ebook subject collections, but they are our most downloaded and cited type of book content by really quite a long way. So now we've decided to put them together in more broad, subject-orientated collections instead. And a single title business model was created to give customers the flexibility to license the titles they need when they need them. So this is great as it provides the option to license additional content to complement their existing ebooks, or take a first step in curating kind of their own new ebook collection from scratch. So moving away from kind of ebook models specifically to some more kind of general areas of innovation, Springer Nature has been doing quite a bit of experimenting with artificial intelligence recently. So, for example, we are doing a number of auto translations, which have enabled us to release some of our German language titles from Springer VS and JB Metzler, which are 2 of the German language imprints that we have under the Springer Nature family, into English. And there is obviously scope to grow this further with other languages, which then may enable the work of scholars who write in other languages to be published more easily in English, and therefore further their reach, for example. There's also a pilot underway on AI audiobooks, which I think some of the Palgrave titles will really lend themselves to, actually. And again, that will make the books more accessible. We also have the ability to embed additional digital material via the Springer Nature More Media app. And we're also starting to sell video content as well, as this seems to be a really major way that the students and researchers supplement their learning. So lots going on, so watch the space.
Yeah, that's excellent. So, describe the importance from an editor's perspective of focusing on the interdisciplinary titles and subjects. We've sort of talked about a lot of the movement you're making into this in these areas. What does this say about the research readership and the evolution of our societies in general?
Well, I think research at the edge of those disciplinary boundaries is often considered the most forward-thinking and exciting.
Yeah.
It brings together subject areas and researchers that wouldn't normally sit together. It allows for new dialogues. It creates new terminologies and can, as we discussed earlier, contribute enormously to solving some of the real-world challenges that we face. That's not to say, though, there isn't enormous value to research that stays within its own disciplinary boundaries too. I don't
Yeah.
want you to think that
Right.
that's all we're after. I mean, obviously, there's always a new approach or a new angle. New discoveries are made, new methods developed. But from a practical perspective of how we sell content, for example, selling vast collections of ebooks where we have to select one particular subject that a title is most applicable to, which then denotes which subject collection it should sit in, doesn't really help the interdisciplinary research get the wide dissemination that it deserves.
Mhm.
So this is another reason why we've developed these new flexible ebook models.
Excellent. So, sticking on that, I mean, looking ahead, what are some of the emerging topics you're keeping a special eye on? What areas might be poised for a spike in research and titles?
So it's probably a pretty obvious answer given the theme of this, but I'd go with social justice.
Yeah.
And within that, structural inequalities, very much taking intersectional approaches, inter and transdisciplinary work, and then also co-produce research as part of that. And then to go along with this, more didactic content on new and emerging methodologies to make that work possible. And then I'd say sustainability is in the SDGs, of course. This includes climate change, but within that, for humanities and social science, gender, public health, migration studies, these themes permeate all across HSS. It could be something like green criminology or gender in education. There's just a whole sort of family of related themes around social justice that are really getting a lot of interest from readers and writers.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking in particular about my areas of the humanities programme, and as Tamsin's just mentioned, there's obviously a massive focus on the intersection of humanities with the SDGs. And the big ones for us seem to be particularly in relation to things like gender, health, climate change, and justice and human rights. So I won't repeat the importance of this, but kind of looking at other areas, anything that revolves around the digital, particularly digital inequality, remains extremely buoyant, and I think will do for some time. Then we have some really innovative areas like experimental film and global theatre and media misinformation and crisis communication, particularly in light of the pandemic, in light of the Russia-Ukraine war, and then other sort of little pockets of interest like cognitive literary studies. All these. I just find my team's list very exciting, but there's just so much there that we can get our teeth into.
Yeah, that's great. Tamsin, you mentioned co-produced research, and just for my own sake, I'm curious what that means. Is that just something? Is that a function of sort of this interdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary approach to research, where it might be research produced by separate entities or supported by different organizations?
Yeah, I get it's another version of interdisciplinarity, really, but it's looking at the methods involved.
Oh, okay, great. So, curious, how does popular culture factor into your catalog? What are you basing your acquisition strategies in this area?
So given the subject areas that my team covers, that's sort of film, media and communication, literature, theatre and performance, arguably quite a considerable chunk of our publishing programme on my side of things is related to popular culture. Do we publish only books that look at really popular culture? Absolutely not. Obviously, we do want to publish work that looks at cultural material that's going to be fairly widely known in order to attract as large a readership as possible. But what is popular, in inverted commas, is obviously quite a subjective term, depending on what you're into and your own sphere of reference. If your area of research is science fiction and fantasy, for example, I'm going to use that because we've just launched a new series in this area. You're probably going to be coming across and citing a lot of material that isn't exactly mainstream. So that series has got books on The Hobbit, it's got books on things like Dune, but it's also got books on things that I've never even heard of before. But presumably, if you're really deep in research in this area, then you will have done. So, then as an editor, you kind of need to make a call about whether publishing something that is a little more niche is still going to add value and say something new about that subject, and how that might then play out in terms of sales and usage ultimately. So that's where our editor's knowledge of the market comes in, as well as the external review process to a certain extent as well, as that can also give us quite a steer. And the timing of a particular publication, if something, I don't know, if there's going to be a film version of a very famous book coming out later that year, then obviously that kind of makes you think there might be a little bit more popular than it would have been otherwise. We've had some quite surprising successes with books that appear to have quite a niche focus. For academic books, there's almost always a consideration of historical or socio-political or cultural context in which a particular book or film or TV program or podcast is produced. So this assists with kind of the breadth of appeal and longevity. And whilst we also do the occasional publicity title, we're not a trade publisher. And that really is kind of where capturing what is popular at a certain moment in time is much more important. But yes, we do publish a lot that's on popular culture per se. And we love it.
Good. So the dynamic of print and digital seems to never go away. But moving forward, how do you see print and digital usage evolving? Can you explain how this dynamic plays out in the HSS world versus the hard sciences? And then curious to see how you both view this from a particularly editorial perspective.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think Tamsin and I can really comment in huge amounts of detail about the hard sciences versus HSS, but generally hard sciences tend to favour journal publications over books, whereas HSS is much more book orientated. But that said, the importance of the printed book can vary quite a lot between disciplines, even within HSS. So the printed book still contributes between sort of 20 and 30% of revenue in the books group, which isn't an insignificant amount, really. And we're almost in this kind of slightly annoying point at the moment where we need to ensure that each title is 100% prepped for digital dissemination. It might have some kind of digital additional material, but there will always be a small number of titles that are required in print. So we always have to keep that in mind as well. There's also the misconception that an ebook is much cheaper to produce. I mean, yes, we don't have the printing, the paper, the shipping costs, but the book will still go through all the other elements of the book production process. It will have peer review, copy edited, typeset, cover design, plus the need to ensure that the book is then prepared in the various digital formats required by the market, as well as kind of our own platform upkeep. So it kind of cancels each other out, really. Also because we try and keep our DRM at quite a low level to make our content as user-friendly as possible, there's also a greater risk of piracy. So this needs to be kind of negated as best as possible as well. I think Tamsin had a few bits to add.
Yeah, no, I love this topic. I do think it's quite interesting to step back and think about how readers want to access knowledge and ideas, the ways in which we do now and how this relates to the future of the book. There are certain tempo changes in reading styles that dictate who wants print or digital and when. I think that we see in what we see in humanities and social sciences that some types of content still needs to be in what we understand to be a book form, ideas that are more iterative and build slowly, or stories to be told. We've seen our Palgrave pivots, for example, become hugely popular as a format. They were very short form works for big ideas. But we also publish more didactic texts, professional guides, reference works, and they need to be read in different ways. Perhaps you'll dip in and out of them rather than read them front to back. Right. So whilst we're seeing massive growth in digital consumption of research in our areas, there is a part of the HSS community that wants a hard copy in their hands. We know that professional business writers, for example, will use their book in physical form as a sort of calling card or a gift. And I don't see this disappearing, to be honest, even with generational changes. I also don't think there has to be a great divide between print or digital. It doesn't have to be either or, and I see more hybrid formats. There's some really interesting research in the kind of publishing research communities underway on the future of the book itself, and I'm really excited to see where Palgrave will fall in this over time, and we've certainly got some work to do.
Right. And actually, just looking forward, I don't know if now's the time to do a plug for something. So we've got our third annual Palgrave Macmillan Lecture, which this year takes its focus on how humanities and social sciences research can contribute to the peace agenda. It's going to be on the 21st of September. It will have Professor Stephen Ratuver, who is director at the Macmillan Brown Centre for Pacific Studies at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand, delivering the main lecture, but our editorial director for Politics and International Studies will be chairing it. And there will also be a talk from one of our senior editors covering peace and conflict studies in Oceania and Southeast Asia. It's going to be at 9 a.m. UK time. So I appreciate that's very antisocial for the US. Often we do it in the afternoon to capture a US audience. This year we thought we should kind of focus on the other side of the globe a little bit. But there will be a video of it. So hopefully we will be able to get that on our website very shortly afterwards. Sorry, I did just want to do the plug there. So apologies.
No, that's fine. So where might one find more information on that?
On the Palgrave Macmillan website, www.palgrave.com.
Okay.
Yes, but it's very exciting. This is our third year, and the first one was in celebration of our 20-year anniversary of the Palgrave Macmillan name. And we thought, this is good. And so we've done another one, and then we're doing another one now. So. Good.
Perfect. All right. Well, Tamsin and Felicity, thank you so much. That's all the time we have. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Phil.
Phil.
You just heard from Tamsin O'Riordan, Editorial Director, Social Science, and Felicity Plester, Editorial Director, Humanities, both from Palgrave Macmillan. This series is brought to you with support from Palgrave Macmillan. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.